Welcome back to Boots on the Ground podcast. This is Ryder Richards. Today I am joined by Jen Gregory, and we're going to be talking a little bit about your downtown and, what I might refer to as the hidden levers of downtown revitalization. A lot of people talk about leverage, but sometimes we don't really know what that looks like. So what we're going to talk about today is how you can do some small things to get outsized results. Before I go too much further, I'm going to ask Jen to give me a little bit of background on what she does. She is the president of Downtown Strategies, but she's had a great history working with downtowns and communities.
Yeah, thank you, Ryder. So happy to be with you today. And, just to summarize my experience, I'm a former practitioner. So I've done this type of work before in a community. I did it for about 15 years before moving into the consulting world. So I was the former CEO of the Greater Starkville Development Partnership in Starkville, Mississippi. But I started at the bottom of that organization, came in entry level, started the Main Street program there. Starkville's a college town. It's a great community. But there wasn't a concerted effort to revitalize the downtown. A lot of people doing their own things, but I saw some real potential to some organizational structure and then really to lean in on policy, which is kind of my hobby and my passion. So that led me to, when I departed the Starkville Partnership, I moved to a federal legislative branch agency, actually, called the Stennis Center for Public Service. And so learned a lot about policy, worked on Capitol Hill for a little bit, and then had the great honor of joining Retail Strategies over 5 years ago to start Downtown Strategies. And since then, had the unbelievable privilege of working with almost 200 cities in 25 states. We've built a team of practitioners, and it's really been an amazing experience getting to help communities do this work and really unlock their potential.
There's something about starting from the ground and moving to the level you have. And one of the things that makes what you've done so interesting is a lot of us are advocates for things. We really want to see them work, but the idea of doing that nitty-gritty hard work of policy work, I mean, I don't know. I don't even like doing my taxes, right? So the idea that I'd get involved in more paperwork just seems, I don't know, it's intimidating.
It's intimidating. It's daunting, and it's not sexy, right? It's not that visible work that really elevates a downtown from a site perspective. But I firmly believe that it is the foundation for growth and development that downtowns and communities want to see. So we try to make it a little bit more fun. But the good news is we have a lot of experience managing that, and we've been able to lend that experience to our clients and make it a little less daunting.
Well, speaking of trying to keep things a little less daunting, sometimes we reduce things in order to sort of show things off. So, what we've done today is we've taken a very broad and complex topic, such as downtowns, and we've decided to say, well, let's look at 4 or 5 strategies that you can really use to sort of launch your downtown. These levers that we've mentioned before that you can really use to get this outside effect, this multiplier effect on your community. So, Jen, I'm going to kind of introduce them and let you just talk through them and let people know what is going on with them and why they are important. So, our
Okay.
first one is, strategic business mix. So, what is this and why is it important for your downtown?
Yeah, this is really important. And often it's the topic that we get the most questions about. And really what we mean by a strategic business mix is that, your downtown exudes the character of your community. And how does it do that? Well, in some way, it's the way your downtown looks, but in many ways, it's the experience that people have when they come downtown to shop or eat. So having a diverse blend of businesses is really important. Restaurants, retailers, service providers, and even government services really drive traffic to the downtown in different ways. And today, people are shopping very differently. We can get anything on our doorstep in 2 days. And so businesses really have a unique opportunity to showcase what they have to offer, but also implement some of the strategies that consumers are looking for and expect. And that's things like convenience, being able to purchase things online and pick it up in the stores. So that's one aspect that's super important, but also If you have an existing downtown and you're trying to fill those gaps with new businesses, we get that question a lot. What's the right business mix? What percent of restaurant? What percent of retail? There is no perfect ratio, but really the answer is you need to be able to bring traffic downtown all throughout the day. We kind of love that 24-hour downtown where there's great places to grab breakfast, places to shop, maybe a fitness studio, a hair salon, a place for lunch, dinner, drinks, an art gallery, entertainment, public spaces. So all of these different reasons for people to spend time downtown so that they're not just coming for one particular errand, they're really parking and staying for a couple of hours. So having that strategic business mix really allows that dynamic downtown, and it also allows it to be sort of an economic engine, which is what we love to see.
That sounds great. And it's, of course, if you're going to have people there for several hours at a time and they're going to be doing a lot of different things, relaxing and running errands and having fun entertainment, then yeah, we need to also have what comes to our second point here is enhanced walkability and streetscape. So yeah, I think we can figure out kind of what that means, but what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, it's a super important element. And I love how you kicked off this podcast talking about kind of incremental measures and incremental improvements. We're huge believers in that. And this point, enhanced walkability and streetscape, often trips up city leaders in that incremental space because they think that that means big infrastructure. They think that that means repaving the roads, widening the sidewalks. And while that's on all of our wish lists in many communities, it's expensive and it's not always practical. So thinking about more short-term kind of practical interventions to enhance the walkability and streetscapes include things like improving the pedestrian experience. So if you're not going to be able to rip up the sidewalk and put a new one, what is that experience like when you're walking downtown? Is it well lit? Is there music playing? Are your senses ignited by being downtown? So that's really one piece of it. The other is thinking about traffic calming measures. Most downtowns, especially in rural communities, are very car centric. It used to not be that way, but after World War II, we started to see sprawl and everything became all about the vehicle and moving cars through areas as quickly as possible. Many of our listeners probably have a highway going through their downtown. That's very difficult to change, but we can implement measures that slow down the cars, like painting crosswalks, for example, using the crosswalks as a palette, if you will, for public art, but that slows the cars down as well. Very important. And then otherwise, thinking about green spaces. People want to relax. They want to stop from their busy day and just have a moment to check their emails, sit and have a bite of lunch with a friend. And so having dedicated spaces where people can gather not only fulfills that desire, but it also shows vitality when people are driving or walking through. People love to see people. So having a place where people can land is a really excellent strategy when we're thinking about enhancing the streetscapes.
Yeah, and once again, if you're going to have people chilling out in downtown, then all of a sudden they get to start talking with each other, which brings us to our third part is community engagement and events, right? So once you have made this a friendlier place to be, then of course we want to make it active. So yeah, can you walk us through how you try to make your downtown active? I mean, obviously we can have an event there, but sometimes having an event and getting people to show up is a different thing.
That's right. And often when people are thinking about events, they're thinking about festivals. And then those city leaders that are responsible for those festivals think, oh my gosh, that is the biggest item on my to-do list. It takes a ton of time, a ton of planning, a ton of money. Those festivals are great. They need to happen once or twice a year, and that's it. The rest of the events and programming need to be smaller scale and again, drive traffic downtown. This can be for things like an art walk or a sip and shop event where perhaps the retailers have a glass of wine or a whiskey tasting or whatever it may be that fits your community in their stores. So not only are we thinking about ways to drive traffic downtown, we also want to think really strategically about how these events can be retail promotion events. I can't tell you the number of times that we have communities say, we have all these events. And then we ask the retailers and they say, well, I close during the events because nobody's coming in my shop. That sort of defeats the purpose. So we want to engage the community, invite them downtown, but also strategically push them into the stores and restaurants so that they can experience the great things that downtown has to offer. And so this not only provides sort of an opportunity for new business for these retailers and restaurants, again, it shows people downtown and it gives confidence to investors or entrepreneurs that are thinking about opening new businesses.
That makes a lot of sense to me that if I was going to open a business downtown and be part of that strategic business mix, yeah, I would want people coming into my shop. And if there's something we can do to help drive people there, all the better. So,
Right.
yeah, this is something else that people do talk about is locating a business downtown somewhere. And sometimes you'll bump into one and there's a lot of, I don't know, vacant buildings or things like that. Sometimes the entire downtown is a little out of date. Let's talk about our fourth option here, which is adaptive reuse and facade improvement.
Definitely, Ryder. This is a super important part because this is the built environment. If we think about pedestrians walking down a sidewalk, they're enclosed often by buildings on one side and a street in the middle. And so we talked about streetscape improvements and why that's important to sort of protect the pedestrian. On the other side are those buildings. It frames the downtown, but it also is what often invites people into these stores. It's what we find to be the biggest barrier for communities today. They have historic buildings, they're aging, maybe they haven't been maintained the way that they should have over the years, and it's expensive to improve these buildings because there's a necessity to preserve the historic character of these buildings, but it's vitally important. And so when we work with cities, we recommend a couple of different things for this category. First is that they provide incentives, if they can, to property owners to encourage them to improve the facades. And by that, we mean putting a new coat of paint on the building, improving the sign, having some potted plants out in front of their buildings, ways to invite the pedestrian in. But other ways that we encourage this is for the city or the municipality or economic development authority to get involved themselves. Perhaps they acquire a building downtown that is vacant and showing signs of decline, put funds into it, and then use that as almost an incubator or a catalyst to show other property owners what can happen when this investment is made. It can be a tough thing because often finance is the biggest barrier. But there are policies and incentives that can really affect this. And this is what is most important because it's the inventory for these new businesses.
Well, and yeah, that segues us really nicely into our fifth thing to really leverage here, and one of your passions, of course, policy and administration. So, what do we do about those?
As I mentioned earlier, what I think to be the most important part of downtown revitalization, but often the most neglected, the administration part is critical. Many times in communities, there are fragmented efforts that maybe there's a Main Street organization, a downtown business association, a chamber, the city. Everybody kind of has their own idea for what needs to happen. It's vitally important that there's a strategic plan that everyone is following, first and foremost. But then second of all, there are policies. We call them often carrots and sticks, right? So a carrot we're going to dangle in front of property owners or businesses, things like incentives, facade improvement programs, lease assistance grants, technical support and training. All of these things really encourage those folks to level up and kind of come to the table. If they don't want to, there are those sticks that are available. And these are not as fun, but they're important because the city needs to set a standard and say, our downtown is important to us, and we have an expectation that properties be of a certain condition and that businesses be operated in a certain way. So policies like minimum maintenance ordinances, vacant property registry ordinances are really important to set that standard. And then, of course, there's always things like permitting processes. How can a property owner improve their building? How can I open a new business? Is that process clear to me? And is it easy to navigate through that city process? All of these things are really important important. And then finally, thinking about how historic preservation fits into that. We want to preserve these historic resources, but we don't want it to be detrimental to growth and development. So striking that balance is really important.
So, right now, we've just covered five things. So, if these are little puzzle pieces and together it'll make this lovely picture that sort of, or maybe it sort of greases the skid so that we can really build up momentum here. Well, let us know how that works, right? Like, how do these dovetail into each other to make sure that your downtown actually keeps growing, keeps evolving, right? So, we've talked before about a revitalization engine. So, how do you start that up and then how do we keep it running?
Yeah. And communities need a focus on all five of these areas, not just one. So kind of
Mm,
the way we see these working together is that first, a strategic mix, a strategic mix of businesses and policies that incentivize growth in the business sector are what attract diverse businesses that provide that small business ecosystem that your consumers are looking for. Second, walkability and aesthetics really encourage exploration, gets people out of their cars, wandering around, which ultimately leads to spending more money. Third, events and engagement create that community buzz, and that buzz is priceless. When you start getting organic marketing from attendees of your events, posting on Instagram and Facebook pictures from their downtown events that they participated in, it creates this FOMO effect, right? That people don't want to miss
mhm.
out. They want to be part of that. And then, we think about the character. So, adaptive reuse, taking these old buildings, reimagining what they could exist as today and improving them, it preserves the character that your community is known for, but it also allows you to modernize. We have modern uses, retailers and restaurants that are doing cool and amazing things. But filling into a historic structure is a really cool dynamic. And then finally, policies guide the growth and they provide the support. You can't have the successful adaptive reuse project without a strong foundation of, design guidelines and incentives. And
Mm.
so when all of these really work together, we see these downtowns really kind of take off.
You mentioned again, and I just wanted to circle back around to it, the idea that you have to do all of them. You can't just do one of them. Do you kind of have to do them one at a time and push them in? And is there a specific order you do it in? I have questions like that.
Yeah, these are great questions. And, the answer that I'm 100% convicted of is that you do them one at a time. And that is really frustrating to a lot of city leaders that are aggressive and they're ready to see change. Now, you can have multiple organizations working on one strategy at a time, and that's great, double or triple the effect. And so that's, Ryder, you opened us up kind of talking about these levers for revitalization and change that lead to this multiplier effect. And that is what we believe, that incremental success, one little piece at a time, these pieces stack up to be over time really transformational change, but it takes a minute. And we often see communities give up because they try to do too many things at once. And so they end up doing nothing. They see no progress. Yeah.
Well, and not, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but what is a realistic vision like of a time scale that it might
Mhm.
take to do something like this?
We're an instant gratification society, for sure. We believe that first setting visions should happen in 5-year increments. It's important to dream big, certainly, but things change so rapidly. So first setting a vision that's 5-year increments is really attainable. But then when we think about specific strategies within that vision, it's not uncommon for the implementation of a single strategy to take 8 or 9 months. Sometimes longer. I'll give you an example. We, in a former community that I worked in as a practitioner, we implemented a new set of zoning, a form based zoning code. It took 2 years to get that implemented, and then it took 10 years for us to see the fruits of that labor. But if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't have laid that foundation, we wouldn't have these mixed use projects, an influx of residential units in the downtown that I'm speaking of, and this amazing transformation. So doing the
Mm.
incremental work and being patient to see the results was so worthwhile. And now people don't even recognize the downtown. So it takes time.
That makes a lot of sense. And, y- you were talking about people getting tired. They're not seeing results. They're maybe getting exhausted. You know, there's something about that. I think that we all have a lot of advocates that are pitching in and they're willing to help, but their time and energy is limited. They have jobs, they have other lives. So, I know that we can lean a lot on our volunteers and people in our community to help us, but how would you recommend, let's say, a slightly smaller town that can't fund all this stuff? How do you think they should get started? What are some of the challenges that they're going to run into?
Sure. And you're exactly right. Most rural communities have limited staff. They don't have a full time person dedicated to downtown. They're relying on volunteers, and those volunteers get burnout. So, first, starting out with some of the challenges that we see. First is limited resources and expertise. I'm able to consult with and advise communities on best practices because I've spent my entire career doing this work. Most of our city leaders, they haven't done that, and that's okay. So they're scared to get started because they don't want to make a mistake. Limited
Mm,
resources, also, not just in terms of expertise, but money. Right? I mean, everyone's got
yeah.
limited budgets. It's expensive. The second challenge that we like to think of is the risk of advocate burnout. You mentioned community volunteers. Most of the time, there's a handful of people doing everything in a community, and they either age out, their priorities shift, and then you're kind of starting from scratch. Other challenges we see is a big one, and that's a lack of objective accountability. It's so easy to kind of get burnout and then just move on to something else that maybe is a little bit easier. And if there's no accountability, then it kind of falls by the wayside. And then finally, this is a big one, difficulty in seeing the bigger picture. It's really hard to know what you should do. And so bringing in a consultant like us allows us to bring that third party perspective. We're not from your community. We don't know all of the political dynamics and the cliques and all of those things that are in every single community. And so with fresh eyes, we can say, hey, you need to do this. And we've seen it work in these other communities of your size, and we're going to help you do it. And often that support of accountability, the expertise that we bring, helping you set up a sustainable framework of implementation and bringing those fresh eyes really levels up your opportunity for success in downtown revitalization.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Because you've worked with a lot of communities, you've seen a lot of things, you know which are the right steps to take first. But the other side of this is the long term accountability.
Mhm.
So, when I used to teach, that was one of the biggest things is just getting the students to show up and work every day and they see results. But sometimes it requires, somebody kind of looking over your shoulder or holding your hand, carrot stick, as you
Mhm.
were saying before. And the other thing is sometimes as a teacher, people do not like you. And that's okay, right? You're
Yeah,
not really there to be their friend. You're there to help them get results. And at the end of it, you can still be friends and they can see you as a mentor rather than sort of an authoritarian figure. But it was kind of a nice transition to be able to move into that role after the success shows up, to
that's right.
let the community get the faith by seeing the results show up.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the accountability is what we find to be really a game changer in our relationships with communities is that not only are we saying, "Hey, we talked about this and you were going to have this done by, the next 4 months. How is that going?" But if they say, "I'm stuck. I didn't do anything because I didn't know what to do," then we can move into the next phase, which is, "Okay, how can we help you? What are you stuck on? We've seen this before. This isn't new. Let's get you over this roadblock." And so I think that combination of accountability plus support is really comforting to a lot of city leaders that wear so many hats.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Well, Jen, I don't need to take up a whole lot more of your time, but I really do appreciate the way these ideas can work together. We were talking about it previously. If you're just growing even a few percent every year in traffic and in growth, but every one of those multiplies. And over time, it will double what you had just in a few years over what you had previously. And a lot of this is sticking to it. A lot of this is making sure you're taking the right steps so you know you're not throwing your energy away. And sometimes maybe that's, having us on board as a cheerleader as well.
That's right. That's right. You're exactly right. And it's been a pleasure to chat with you today about this, Ryder. And I think the, kind of takeaway that I'd love to leave with our listeners is that first, slow down. It is incremental. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But second of all, you don't have to do it all on your own. And, if there's an opportunity for us to support you, we'd love to do that. We love downtowns. We love rural communities. And it's always a pleasure for us to get to support communities and help them grow.
All right. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thanks, Ryder.